Hello and welcome to episode 207 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. My regular co-host, Maz, is back on the show this week to discuss the Orlando Informer Meetup at Universal Orlando Resort from last month. We both attended this event, and we will be talking about it for the next two episodes. There is a lot to discuss here. We have almost been doing this for 4 years, so I'm going to make this part quick this week. Please, make sure you are subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. It really is important for us. Now, let's talk Orlando Informer. Happy 2025, and thanks for being here, Maz.
Thanks for having me.
So we are going to have a blast here talking about the Orlando Informer Meetup. We went the first weekend in December. There was also a meetup the second weekend in December, and you can check. They have these meetups a couple times a year. We'll tell you about when you can go and do some more of that a little later. But you decided that you were going to do both days of the Orlando Informer Meetup. I just did Saturday. And for anybody who doesn't know, Orlando Informer, the company, basically rents out Universal Orlando Resort, Universal Studios Florida, and Universal's Islands of Adventure. And you have limited crowds, free food, and I would say a good selection of everything that's available at Universal is open. It's not everything, but you do get a very, very good taste of what is available at Universal. So for a little bit more, to a substantial amount more, depending on when you get your ticket to this event, than a regular day pass, you have from 9 o'clock at night until 12:30 or 1:30 in the morning to enjoy these theme parks. There's a whole lot more that's involved, and we're going to get way more in depth, but that is basically just the basic information that you need to understand this event. So I want to start by talking to you about Friday night. I didn't go Friday, so all of this is just going to be you. You were able to take advantage of the special check-in area, which we didn't get the chance to do on Saturday night. So why don't you describe first showing up, registering, doing all of that, and then what was available for you before the event officially started?
Yeah, so you do get special hours in the theme park after the day guests are gone. And like Rick said, not everything's open at that point, attractions-wise, but you do get to enter the parks before the event officially starts. So around like 5 o'clock or so, you can get into the parks with your ticket for the Orlando Informer Meetup. And so you can enjoy things like shows and shopping and things like that that aren't open during the meetup hours. So it's a great way to kind of get best of both worlds. So that's the plan that I went into Friday with, thinking, you know what, I'm going to go take advantage of a few things that I won't be able to do later on in the night. And so I showed up. I had no idea where I was going because this was my very first meetup, but luckily it was very well marked. They had a ton of people with signs giving directions, yelling Orlando Informer this way, so you knew exactly where you were going. The check-in process was super easy. They scanned my ticket. I gave them my ID. I do appreciate that they check. Every ticket is assigned to a name, to a person. So that way you don't have anyone able to kind of scam the system and have more people in the park to inflate those crowds. And then I kind of breezed through. They have check-in bites. That is a new thing they've started this year. And it's a bunch of like small food appetizer type things. It's all unlimited and it's in the check-in area. I have enough food restrictions right now that I kind of bypassed that. But from what I saw, everything looked very tasty. And I think for a future meetup, I would spend a little more time there looking to see if there was something I could enjoy.
And that's a new thing they've been doing the past couple of events, because when I went, I believe it was at the end of 2022, that year they gave you a $15 gift card and you were able to use that on food before the event officially started. But I think this makes a little bit more sense. Just giving everybody $15, that gift card could easily go to waste if you were just sitting there waiting for the free food and the event. But this way, they have food there. If they see they need more, they can bring in more, but they don't have to make anything. It's probably a much more cost-effective way to do this. Plus, it gives everybody who's just there for the event like a little private something special, because especially when these things are happening in December on the weekends, the parks are absolutely packed before these events. You have the day guests who are there for a regular day at Universal, and then you have the people who are coming for the Orlando Informer event, and everybody's there at the same time. So even waiting in line to get food is kind of a nightmare. So I do think this new setup is a better way for them to accommodate everybody and still do that free food that everybody is so excited about with this event. And before we get more into event-specific things, when you were there during the day, this was when they still had the Wicked experience that was set up at Universal, and because you were a regular day guest there when the parks were open, it was available to you. So just on a little side note, what did they have with this Wicked experience?
Yeah, this was really my main, like, I need to do this before the parks close thing as, a massive theater fan. And so it was really cool. I mean, on one hand, if you're not a Wicked fan, you're going to look at it and be like, it's a glorified store. But if you are a Wicked fan and you're walking through and you see they have like little photo op opportunities where it looks like you're, holding the broom or in Glinda's room, or looking at these costume replicas that they have placed around, that was a really cool experience. I love like the little behind the scenes stuff, and getting to see these costume replicas up close and seeing all the detail on them was like, I was nerding out over that. It was great.
And by the way, Maz, we're theme park fans. Everything we do is just a glorified store, so you don't have to explain
It's
it
true.
that way. What other things were you able to get accomplished before the parks closed down for the day guests?
I honestly did a lot of walking around and looking at all the holiday decorations because I've never been to Universal during the holiday season. So I've never seen all the decorations. And I was lucky enough to go to Universal last year, and I did a few shows during that time. So I felt like that was recent enough where I was able to sacrifice saying like, oh, I don't need to see the Bourne stunt show again. I can go look at, these Christmas trees and how these lights are, and, everything was lit up and beautiful, and just kind of got to take that in a bit before I knew Friday my game plan was rides. And so once, those day crowds emptied out, I knew I wanted to be going ride, 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 ride. And so I kind of took that in between time to marvel at all the pretty lights.
But if you have not seen the Bourne Stunt Show, do not miss it. Just on a side note that has nothing to do with anything else. It's amazing.
It is incredible. Like if I were to go back and do another meetup, I say like, I don't want to already. I would definitely want to see the stunt show again. It's so good.
And I think one of the things before we get into your experience with the actual event is you were very active both nights in talking to people that you met in line and other people who were at the event. And you noticed that this is how a lot of people do Universal Orlando Resort now. This is how they experience these theme parks, is they save up the money, spend a little bit more to have a better experience when they're there with limited crowds and free food. You talked to a lot of people who were there on their 6th, 7th, 8th Orlando Informer.
Yeah, it's incredible. I talked to a lot of people between Friday and Saturday, and I was the only person in every one of those conversations I had whose first meetup it was. So everyone I spoke to, had either been there several times. This is what they do every year. This is their tradition. And, it kept coming back to, I can never do the parks any other way again. And I think I told you Saturday night that I felt like I just kept hearing this over and over. And like, I think I might be becoming one of them. I get it. I really do get it.
I was an annual pass holder for 3 years at Universal, maybe a little more than that. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back and look at my records. But it really does make sense to me, somebody who had a Universal AP, but only went like a couple times every year. It would make a lot of sense to save up that money that you would spend for an AP and just go absolutely hog wild over one weekend and have that be your universal fix for the year, especially like you said, if you're really into seeing the holiday decorations. If you wanted to, you could arrange it so that you could see the holiday parade, the Macy's parade that they run at Universal Studios Florida, as part of your Orlando Informer ticket. There are a lot of ways that you could use this event to maximize your time, and there are two different things that people should consider when it comes to how much something costs. It's the actual cost, but then the other thing is the value. And sometimes you pay a little bit less, but that money that you save is costing you a lot on the experience end of things. So this is an event, I believe, even as somebody who bought my ticket late and the price of these tickets continues to escalate. It's sort of a dynamic pricing model that as more people buy tickets to the event, the price continues to rise. Even me paying $70 over the original price for my ticket, I still think it is worth it. Maybe paying $100 more than I would for a day at Universal, but getting all the food. This might be the way to do it. And I know you're already planning on doing another one.
I am. Yeah. And I think, for out of town guests as well, like for me, I have to consider the hotel cost and everything, factoring in. And normally when I go to Universal, I have to stay at one of the top hotels to get the express pass. And, I say have to. That's my preferred method. I prefer going to Universal and having that express pass to be able to do what I want to do, in my weekend trip or whatever it is. And when you look at that cost of, your day ticket, your 2-day park to park ticket, plus the hotel that's, a higher tier because you want that express pass, or staying in a lower tier and adding that express pass on, you're just about breaking even in terms of this event and a cheaper hotel, which is what I did for this weekend. So, obviously do the math, the weekend, whatever weekend it is, prices vary, all that stuff. But for me, the cost of the tickets was just about the same. And then I got food thrown into the Orlando Informer event, and lines were even shorter than they would be with an express pass. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And I think it's a great way to see the parks.
And you were able to stay at Aventura then, not spend as much as you would at one of the deluxe hotels. And even though you saved money, you paid about what you would pay for a value at Walt Disney World to stay at Aventura. They still had buses ready to go, ready to pick you up, even when it was 12:30 in the morning, 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that is honestly, that was a huge perk. I was a little nervous to see how the buses would run. Disney veteran, we all know those buses can vary based on the day. Um, and it was so smooth. I mean, 3 minutes in between buses. The first night, I like walked up to the bus stop. Within 3 minutes, a bus was there to take me to the park. Same thing coming home. Same thing the second night. It was such an easy process that, I was nervous about it as a solo traveler too, and it was fantastic.
Awesome. So once the event finally started, it's now 9 o'clock. They have gotten the day guests out of there, and it is time to start riding some rides and having those experiences with the limited capacity. What did you do first?
I went straight to Hogsmeade. Um, I cut through the Jurassic World area and headed straight into Hogsmeade. And there were definitely a lot of people there, because a lot of people wanted to get in line for Hagrids right away, which we can talk about strategies for that a little later because I do think there is one. But I was able to, even with the crowds and people congregating in that section, I was able to walk on Forbidden Journey, like truly walk on. Like they put me through the express line because they were like, there's no one here. And I had a car all to myself. It was wild.
Awesome. So I do think that is the first area where we're going to go here, and we're going to talk about Hogsmeade, because then on Saturday night when we were there, it was a little bit crowded too. I mean, this is definitely the place where most people congregate during this event. It's not crowded by theme park terms. If you were at Animal Kingdom this past weekend, I'm sure it was more crowded than it was at Hogsmeade. But when you consider how limited of an event, this was the crowded part. There were times where Hagrid's was up to 55 minutes. When we wanted to get all three of the butter beers, we had to go into 3 Broomsticks. And to get all 3, the hot, frozen, and regular butter beers, we had to wait in line for, what would you say, maybe 15 minutes?
Yeah, probably.
So there were people here. This was the closest thing you had to crowds. What would you say is your strategy then to riding Hagrid's? Because I think that's the only thing I noticed, and neither of us were brave enough to do Velocicoaster, so that might be the other thing. But the only thing I noticed having any sort of line was Hagrid's.
Yeah, so Hagrid's definitely high demand, so is Velocicoaster, but Friday night, Velocicoaster was a walk-on almost all night because it was a little chillier than usual. Um, so, that worked in favor of all those people. I was not one of them. Hagrid's was about a 55-minute wait for most of the night. And I think the issue with rushing there right away is that you have all the day guests who, right before they have to leave the park, they get in line for Hagrid's because they know it's the last thing they can do. Just like any, theme park fan knows, you get in line right before it closes, you get to ride the ride. So I think a lot of fans or a lot of day guests did that. And then you have a lot of meetup people saying, well, this is the one thing that I really want to do, so I need to get this out of the way right at the start. Going into that area to get in line pumps up the wait times like crazy. So I noticed that around 10:30 on Friday night, the meetup went until 12:30. And around 10:30, that line started to trickle down. And it got down to, I think, like a 30-minute wait at one point, which is, it's still a wait, but it is so much better than, earlier in the night and, miles better than your regular day.
And when we were there on Saturday night, I don't want to keep bouncing back and forth, but Hagrid's did go down for a few minutes. So that's also a risk. I would say if you see it at 30 minutes and it's something that is a must do for your day at Orlando Informer, I think you got to take that 30 minutes and say, this is the one thing that's going to be a wait for us. So it's okay to wait 30 minutes for it. Okay, so after experienced Hogsmeade, where did you go after that?
I went over to Marvel's Superhero Island and I got on SpiderMan. And, that's a classic. It's one of the best ones there. And once again, I had the entire car to myself. I took a picture and sent it to my family because that was one of our favorite rides when we went as kids. And I was like, can you believe this? I am the only person in the entire vehicle, which was pretty cool. And I got off and got right back on to rewrite it again because there was no wait. And the team member working looked at me and was like, you want your own car again? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so I got to ride again in my own car. It was pretty great.
One thing we noticed when we did it again on Saturday is they spray the water at certain points. So if a car has gone through a few times without any guests, it'll develop a pretty substantial pool of water. And we both had some wet slacks there for a few minutes, and it was chilly that weekend. So wet slacks were a little bit of an inconvenience. But anyway, so you did SpiderMan. Was that basically all you did at Islands? Because I know you hit one particular ride really, really hard, and I'm wondering when we're getting there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. But before I left Islands, I did hop back over into Hogsmeade to eat at Three Broomsticks because I wanted to get some actual food in me. And it was really cool the way it was set up. That was the longest line I waited in all night. It was probably 15 minutes, again, like it was for us on Saturday. And when you walk in, they have it almost cafeteria style, where you grab your tray and they have all these dishes and drinks all set out, and you just grab whatever you want because it's all included. And I got their fish and chips, which I've had before and are great. I got some butterbeer, and then I got this apple pie that they were serving out. They were listed as individual apple pies, and I swear it was bigger than my head. This thing, I got like 3 bites into it, and I was like, this is too much. And normally I'd be like, well, I'm not even going to attempt this pie. But hey, I already paid for it, so why not try it? And it was pretty good.
On Saturday, we met up at Epcot before heading over to the event, and Maz is like showing me her phone. She's like, wait till you see this pie. This pie. And we were trying to guess. We never ended up looking it up. I don't even know if it's something that's available most days. But we were guessing that if they were selling this pie at a regular day at Three Broomsticks, it would have to be $20, right?
Easily. Easily. I mean, I am not overstating how giant this pie was. It was crazy, and it was deep too. Like, I stuck my fork in and my fingers were almost touching the top of the pie. That's how deep my fork went in there. Lots of apples. It was great.
And the fish and chips were good. And I do think that is the one food place as well that did experience some lines. I mean, maybe we did see a few others, but we'll talk a little bit more about how some of the sit-down restaurants set up their experience, because you're obviously not going in to a sit-down restaurant and being served by a waiter or waitress. So they did have a little bit of a different style. It was more catered, like you would cater a business event or a wedding reception, where you would go up and they would have mass-produced trays and then you would serve yourself. So the quick service locations did tend to get small lines because there's only so much the team members can do. And when people are ordering free food, they take that self-respect nozzle that prevents you from just ordering everything on the menu. They take that and they just rip off that nozzle and they just go for it. So definitely incredible job by the team members for dealing with that. But sometimes you would get a few lines. So after that, where did you head then?
So then I went over to the other side to Universal Studios. And by this point in the night, I took the walkway in between Seussland. They had this little backstage walkway that was really cool. And at this point, I had texted 3 different people, and I was like, you have to do this. We have to come back and do this event. This is so cool. Because I had ridden Forbidden Journey twice, the Hippogriff twice, and Hagrids twice, which is wild to say that I was halfway through the night and I had done that much already. It's, you could never get that done in a day. So I'm walking across and I've got my like hot butter beer that I grabbed and my pretzel from a vendor, and I'm like living the high life. And I made my way back over into Diagon Alley, which was that was probably the area I was most excited for, just in terms of seeing low crowds there. And after being in Hogsmeade, I was a little hesitant to think that the crowds would be that low, but there was like nobody in Diagon Alley. It was incredible. I was walking around and I would like turn a corner and there'd be nobody in my field of vision. And it felt like I was the only one there at points, which, for a theme park nerd is like the coolest thing you could ever hope to do. So I was able to go do Gringotts right away. There was no wait. And then Gringotts like came back to the station. I went to get off the ride and I looked at the team member and I was like, hey, there's no one in line. Like, could I re-ride? And she was like, oh yeah, go for it. And then she went, how about you hop into the front? Because there's no one in the front. And I was like in the third row. And I was like, okay, that works for me. So I didn't even have to get up, didn't have to move. I just got to go like right into the front seat and ride it right again. And there were like 3 people in my car. So that was really cool because when do you get to do that? That's awesome.
So the event on Friday, did it start at 8 or at 9?
On Friday, it started at 8, I think.
Okay, so when Maz says that she messaged people with how great the event was, I just pulled back my messages and I have 8:51. Okay, this event is the greatest. And then I texted back, that's awesome. I'm stoked for tomorrow. It's going by too fast. 9:05.
It was.
That's funny that you mentioned that because I did remember. I went to bed specifically. I was like, I'm going to bed at 9 o'clock so that I can be ready to hit this event and do it. And before I went to bed, you were already telling me how great it was. And I was like, okay, I'm in for a good time.
Yeah, I drank that Kool-Aid pretty fast. It was over for me by then. I was in.
After Diagon Alley.
So after Diagon Alley and I walked around, meandered in there for a little while, I went to my main attraction of the night, what I cared most about, which was Revenge of the Mummy, which is, right up there, one of my favorite theme park attractions of all time. And I got on the ride and it said it was a 5-minute wait. So I was like, oh man, this is like going to be the one thing that's not a ride now, walk on. But no, it was. It was just 5 minutes is how long it takes you to walk through the entire queue because it's massive. But it was really cool getting to actually see the queue because I've always only gone through the express lane. So I've never gotten like the full story behind that ride and like seen the little interviews of like Brendan Fraser and like the cast members and that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. And so I rode the Mummy this evening and it was an hour and a half, maybe tops. I rode it 6 times and I got off of it. My last ride ended right at 12:30, which was perfect. And I got off and I was like, I think if I did another event, I would like camp out here and see how many times I could ride this ride because it was so much fun. Like I could just do it over and over. And by the end of the night, I'd made friends with a couple of the cast members, I'd made friends with a couple of the team members who were, in charge of the ride. People in my ride vehicle, we were like all re-riding together. It was great. It was like one of those really fun communal things that develops where like you can really only experience that shared sense of like, yeah, we're in this together. And like a weird situation like this where you're like, how do I get back on the ride faster? And the team members like, go through this door. You don't have to go through the whole line. And you're like, oh, this is great. And so you have like your little group doing that. Um, you know, it's a great ride. It is one of the best. And when you're riding it with a bunch of other theme park nerds who are also big fans of the ride, and you get to that end screen with Brendan, and everyone in your car goes, "If I had gotten my cup of coffee," along with the screen, it is, you know, how do you beat that? You can't.
And you are definitely a person who is not above riding a ride multiple times in the same day. It is definitely something really cool that you do that I don't know a lot of other people who do it, but you'll ride Expedition Everest 20 times in a day. You'll ride the Mummy 6 times in an hour. And it's really cool. And in events like this, if you do have a quirk, like you love to do rides over and over and over again, well, this is the perfect opportunity. I believe with Express Pass, you can only Express Pass a ride once, correct?
It depends on the Express Pass. There's a cheaper version and you can only do it once, and then there's the more expensive version that's unlimited. But even then, I've waited in the Express line for this ride longer than I did that night.
Absolutely. So this is the perfect time to wrap up talking about night 1, and we will be back next week, and we will talk about night 2, where Maz and I destroyed Universal Orlando Resort together and had such a good time, and we will talk about that next week. Thanks for being here, Maz.
Thank you.
This has been episode 207 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Very quickly, I just wanted to do a quick checkup on everybody. Here in the United States, the inauguration will be taking place in a few days, and I know that is going to be hard for a lot of our listeners. We have spent the past 4 years trying to focus on inclusion and trying to make sure that everyone felt a part of the theme park community through our show. I remember 8 years ago when I still lived in Arizona, since no person had ever ascended to the White House without having been either a general, governor, congressperson, or cabinet member, I was sure that somehow on January 20th of 2017, it would be stopped. I actually ran on the treadmill for an hour starting right before noon that day, hoping to see a barrage of text messages that surprised me saying, "It didn't happen, it didn't happen." Well, I never got those text messages, and we know the next 4 years were extremely rough. It is my goal that this podcast remains a safe space. The rhetoric has been even worse this time, but we are not going to sell out the people in our lives. If you're doing anything to put positivity out into the world, let us know. In the past, we have had people on who are raising money for LGBTQ plus charities and doing other important things. If you are going to be the change you want to see in the world, we would love to promote you. Reach out to us on social media. We will be back next Thursday when Maz and I will continue talking about the Orlando Informer Meetup at Universal Orlando Resort. Until then, have a great week.